How much money is sitting forgotten about in your freezer? Most of the time when we think about food waste, we think about those things that are getting wasted and going bad in our refrigerator, like produce items or leftovers that get forgotten about. But those items in your freezer are sitting there quietly getting freezer burn. So instead of neglecting our freezers, let me teach you how I do an inventory on our freezers and move into the spring and summertime. If you're just meeting me, my name is Amy Cross, and this is The Cross Legacy, where I teach you how to save money on groceries and reduce your food waste and bring a little bit of hope back to your kitchen. Our grocery budget is $135 per person, and for the last 2 years, it's just been my husband and I in our household, so our grocery budget is $270 per month. Today we're going to be talking about something that I do every winter as it starts to wind down and we see those first signs of spring. I have a chronic illness called reflective sympathetic dystrophy. So oftentimes during the fall and winter time is when I have the hardest times all year with flare-ups and really low energy. So in the early fall, early September, before the weather starts changing, I am really concentrating on making sure that we are batch cooking meals and getting things into the freezer to get us through the entire winter. We moved into this house on September 12th. So right as I was doing those first grocery shopping trips, when we moved into the new house and those first meals I was making here, I was making sure that I was getting freezer meals put away in the freezer. If you want to see some of those meals, we have them all on a playlist on our meals series. We also filmed a video showing all of those meals that I had batch cooked, so you can see what I was batch cooking going into the fall and winter time. We'll link up both of those videos in the description so you can find them easily. Batch cooking meals like this is something that I have always done that has helped me for many decades now of making sure that I was prepared for surgeries or even having babies, but definitely through the fall and winter season for us. But those meals are just meant for a season, whether it's a season of your life or a season in the weather. You don't want them to be sitting around for years on end in your freezer. Our appetites and interests change as you go through the seasons. Like, who really wants to have meatloaf and mashed potatoes when it's 90 degrees out? So as we're seeing those first signs of spring coming is when I start looking in my freezers to see what we can use up, especially if we have a rainy day coming before we get the nicer later spring weather. Things like soups and chilies that I had put away in the freezer earlier in the fall, I'm making sure that we're pulling those out for lunches and getting them used up. I'm looking for things in my freezer like chicken pot pies that I've made, or lasagnas, casseroles, anything that needs to go into the oven. I even had a few tater tots that were left from making a tater tot casserole. I batch cook things like enchiladas for the winter time, but that's not something that I use in the summertime. Pretty much anything that I'd be using in the oven, I'm trying to heat up now so I'm not heating up my kitchen later. In our kitchen, we don't have a microwave, toaster oven, or an air fryer, so everything is either cooked on the stovetop or in the oven. So the items that I want to make sure that I'm using up, I start making a list in my grocery planner to make sure that I write down those meals or ingredients that we need to use up. And also in my grocery planner, I make a list of things that we don't necessarily need to use right away, but we need to start thinking about them in a different way. Like those pita breads that I buy that we make for personal sized pizzas, those we turn into gyros as we're moving into the summertime. And those hamburger buns that I have in the freezer for making sloppy joes, I want to make sure that we're pulling those out the first time we pull the barbecue out to make hamburgers. I don't like to have bread items in the freezer for more than 6 months. I also want to make sure that I'm using up the produce that I have in the freezer before that next harvest season. So last harvest season, I had bought a bunch of peppers that I cut up. I want to make sure that I'm using those in these meals coming up before we get fresh peppers that are on sale. And I have a ton of tomatoes from last harvest that I want to make some ketchup. And things like berries. If I'm not making a jam that year, I want to make sure that I'm using up the last of the berries. We like to make a frozen yogurt bark with extra berries, and it's a nice treat. We also just filmed a video on what produce items I buy throughout the year, so make sure that you're checking that out. It'll be up on the channel soon. And even me can make mistakes mistake sometimes, even though I really concentrate on not having any food waste. A couple years ago, I had a dental implant and we were in a habit of putting spinach in the freezer when we hadn't used it all to make smoothies. But for an entire year, I wasn't able to suck through a straw and I didn't want smoothies, but I was still in that habit of tucking the spinach away. So when I went to go do this seasonal inventory, I realized I had 8 bags of spinach in our kitchen freezer. So I made sure that I used up that spinach using some different ideas since we weren't in the middle of wanting to make soups. I used it in omelets and also making high protein spinach dip. Things that I do focus on going into spring is making sure that I have meat in my freezer. We buy a half a beef every 2 years or so. Sometimes we push it out a little bit further than that, but we always have the meat, the beef in the freezer. But I'm also making sure that we're getting things like pork loin or bacon so we can portion that out and have it all through the summer. And just to clarify, the beef in our freezer is purchased with that $135 per person grocery budget. I always make sure that we have cooked protein in our freezers that we can pull out at any time to make quick and easy meals, especially when we're busy or have a later appetite in the summertime. So things like shredded chicken or pulled pork, we always have ground beef. Most of the time we also have cooked taco meat in the freezer. And I like whenever I make a roast to put some in the freezer that's sliced so it's ready to go. All of these things I can mix up with whatever ingredients I have on hand at the time and whatever we're hungry for and be able to make a quick meal. So I encourage you to grab your planner instead of your garbage can when you go to check out your freezer this spring. And your budget will thank you. We have our grocery planners and our zero waste produce guide both linked in the description with a discount code, so make sure you're checking that out. And we post 3 videos on this channel every single week to give you tips to save money on groceries.